and assists.
Now, actually, he finished that season 10th in league scoring with a 19.1 average and 3rd in assists with close to 5 per game. He proved to himself and those who had faith in him that he could play with the very best, and the rest of his basketball career has been well documented. He coached 3 St. Mary's men's teams to national championships in the 70s. He coached the Canadian women's team in the 1976 Olympics. He coached at the Universities of Toronto and Alberta, worked in the business as a recruiter and motivator. He has been a TV color commentator for university and professional basketball for a couple of decades and is now athletic director at his alma mater, Acadia University. Ross Quackenbush, the current St. Mary's coach, played on the Huskies for 2 years under Heaney's coaching. He saw Brian's competitive nature as a practice player and on the bench.
That's his strongest personality trait, is his just relentless, fierce, competitive nature. Sort of regardless of where it's pointed. You know, it could be on the basketball court, it could be coaching the basketball team on the basketball court, it could be, you know, in the insurance business, it could be, you know, in television. He's driven. He's a guy, he's got a little motor going in there, and he just keeps going and going and going. And then, and on top of that, you add a lot of energy, and then you make it competitive. That's the way he is.
Brian is a member of the Acadia University Sport Hall of Fame as an athlete 3 times with 2 teams and as an individual. He's a member of the St. Mary's University Sport Hall of Fame as an individual builder and as coach of 2 teams. He's in the Canadian Basketball Hall of Fame as an athlete and coach, and the Ontario West University Basketball Officials Hall of Fame for basketball achievement. Brian is a member of this Hall of Fame as a player with the 1964-65 Acadia Axemen, coach of the St. Mary's 1973 Huskies, but now, this year, as an individual athlete. Our newest addition to the Sport Hall of Fame, Mr. Brian Heaney. Our plaque presenter is Mr. Kevin Sanford, promotions manager of the Chronicle Herald, and to present the pin, a man who won 2 national championships under Brian Heaney and was brought to St. Mary's by Brian, Mickey Fox. All right, Mr. Heaney. The dominant impression everybody's left with tonight is this impression of drive and determination and competitiveness. Does that trace back to those crazy pickup games at Rockaway Beach in New York City?
Well, I think it does. I think you mentioned in the presentation, Rockaway was a very special place. It was a place that was at the end of the subway line in New York City, and it would take you about 2 hours by subway to get all the way from the North Bronx, where Yankee Stadium was, carve all the way through Manhattan and then Brooklyn, and at the last stop, get off at Rockaway. There was a playground where I grew up, and I grew to love basketball in grade school, but we had to play out in the playgrounds, and they had only 1 basket. So the deal was, if you wanted to play there, you had games of 7, and if you made the basket, your team kept it. So if you got 7 points, you won, otherwise you went to the sideline. Well, if you can imagine, on hot summer days, those subway cars were coming down every 20 minutes. There were hundreds of guys that wanted to play in that playground. 1 basket, and you had to learn pretty quick how to fend for yourself, how to make sure that your team won that game if you were going to stay on. And at the end of it, I had it pretty well mastered. I could play for a couple hours or 2.5 hours, but early on, you had to learn that every single possession counted. Well, you'd be on the sideline, and you'd go right to the end of the line. You'd be standing there for an hour and a half before you could play again. So I think competition sort of came into focus for me right there at the beach.
Right, so you come to Acadia. What do you learn during your time there?
Well, Acadia was a tremendous place for me. First of all, I got an opportunity to play, and I learned the fundamentals of the game. We had a great coach, a legendary coach. He's in the Acadia Sport Hall of Fame. I think he'll be here one day on his own. He was the coach of the '65 team, which is in the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame, Stu Aberdeen. And we learned fundamentals of the game, offense and defense, day in and day out. He had attention to detail. And it allowed all of us in those programs in those years to excel as players and to improve as players. And when I got an opportunity to go down and try out for those pro teams, the fundamental grounding and the ability to execute fundamentally stood right out. There were a lot of guys that we all watched on TV or we read about in Sports Illustrated who showed up at those tryout camps in those days. And they were great athletes, but the fundamental grounding just wasn't there. But at Acadia, I was able to develop that, and it's something that I was certainly very appreciative of.
Look, as a final thought here, the AUS, the jump from Acadia to the NBA, it was never done before you, it's never been done after you. When you look back on that, you must be pretty much instilled with pride over that one.
Well, I am, because that's the case. It hadn't happened certainly till then, and it's been a long time since it's happened, if it has. And I'm not sure that anybody who only played their college basketball in Canada had made the jump. There's certainly been Canadians, and lots of them, 16, 17, 18 kids. But they went down to the NCAA, and they were great players in their own right. But to play here and then go down as really an unknown. When I showed up at tryout camp for the Bullets, there were 34 guys, and their scrapbooks were thicker than mine. And I knew right away I was in for trouble. I mean, everybody could play. But as I said, the fundamentals, and especially the defense that Stu Aberdeen instilled in us as players, helped me stand out. And it got me through that tryout camp and into the final 3 guards. And they sent me down to the Eastern League, and about 4 or 5 weeks later, somebody got injured, and they pulled me back up. And that really was a tribute to his coaching and I guess to my buy-in to the fact that if you were going to play the game, you had to learn how to play it right, and it held me in good stead. And I think that was really the difference between anybody else going down and trying to make it, and my ability to be recognized as a good ball player was the fundamentals.
One last quick one. 74 against Mount A. That's not a typo. 74 points against Mount A before the three-point line was introduced. Were you hot that night?
Well, I was. I had a good season, too. I had another 5 games, I think, over 40, 45 points. So I was in scoring mode with that particular team. But on that night, I can remember, a lot of people don't know this, there were 10 minutes left on the score clock, and there was a timeout. And I realized I only had 2 points. I had 1 basket. Oftentimes, because I was a point guard, I didn't score early in the game. Usually it was late. But my roommate at the time, Donnie Smith, we ran off the court, and I said, hey, send me some picks. I want to get involved in the offense here. So with 10 minutes left in the first half and having only 2 points, we came out, and I had 20 in the next 10 minutes. So we went in the locker room, and they decided not to change anything, just run the normal offense. And I got another 10 points in the first 5 minutes, so I had 32. And then they said, all right, feed them. And I went on a scoring binge. I had 13 straight field goals in that game. And a great story about that was Gus McFarland, a portly coach who went on from Mount Allison, became the Dean of Students at McMaster University, got elected to the House of Parliament, and when you'd see the liberals of the day up there on television, you'd tune it in, you'd see Gus, and he was like 1 seat over from the Prime Minister. He was a funny guy and a very astute guy, and he was the coach of that team. And with about 7 minutes to go, the referee blew the whistle, and I went to the free throw line, and Gus came walking out, right out on the court, right from the bench. And I looked, and I didn't know what was happening. I shied away a little bit. And Gus, about 5'9", walked right up, and he stuck his hands out. He says, we played man-to-man, we played zone, we played box and 1, we played triangle and 2. I'm out of defenses. Have a great game.
I didn't score 74 my whole life. Listen, thank you. Congratulations, folks. Brian Heaney.